These cognitive biases will blow your mind. So let's explore the world of cognitive biases. Now this is going to be a great journey. And remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Hindsight bias is the tendency to perceive events as having been predictable after they have occurred. People often believe they knew it all along or could have predicted an outcome once it is known, even if they had no such foresight before the event happened. For example, after a sports team wins a game, fans may say they knew the team would win, despite having no certainty before the match. Another example is after a stock market crash. Investors might claim they saw the signs and should have sold their stocks earlier. Now, it's important to recognize that hindsight bias can be dangerous because it distorts memory and judgment, leading to overconfidence. It can prevent learning from mistakes, as people might believe they could have predicted outcomes, reducing the incentive to analyze decisions objectively. Anchoring bias is the tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information encountered, which is the anchor, when making decisions, even if it's irrelevant or arbitrary. This initial reference point influences subsequent judgments, often distorting rational thinking. For example, when selling a car, if the seller first mentions a high price, like $70,000, potential buyers may anchor their expectations to that amount. This may lead them to perceive any subsequent lower offer as a good deal, even if it's still above market value. For example, $40,000 sounds cheap in comparison to $70,000. Another example is when a store offers a discounted price by first showing a high original price, influencing the customers to believe they're getting a bargain, even if the original price was inflated. Now, anchoring bias can be dangerous because it leads to irrational decisions and overestimations of value. People may fail to objectively assess situations, leading to poor financial choices. Self-service bias is the tendency to attribute positive outcomes to our own abilities and efforts, while blaming negative outcomes on external factors. This cognitive bias helps protect self-esteem, but distorts our perception of reality. For example, a student who accesses a test might attribute their success to their intelligence or hard work, but if they fail, they might blame the difficulty of the test or bad luck. Another example is a manager who takes credit for a successful project but blames team members for any failures. Self-serving bias can be dangerous because it prevents individuals from taking responsibility for their actions and learning from their mistakes. This can hinder personal growth, create conflict in relationships, and lead to poor decision-making. Availability bias is the cognitive tendency to rely on immediate examples that come to mind when evaluating a situation or making a decision. This bias occurs when people overestimate the likelihood of events based on how easily they can recall similar instances. For example, after watching news reports about airplane crashes, a person might overestimate the danger of flying, even though air travel is statistically safe. Another example is when people assume that crime rates are higher in their neighborhood simply because they've recently heard about a local crime. Now, it's important to realize that availability bias can be dangerous because it distorts our perceptions of risks and probabilities, leading to poor decision making. It may cause individuals to avoid certain activities based on rare events or focus on sensationalized news rather than objective data. Is confirmation bias silently killing your business? Imagine this. You're confident in your strategies, supported by data and instinct, but profits are stagnant and decisions backfire? Could it be that the silent killer of businesses, confirmation bias, is at play? Now let's uncover how this cognitive trap might be sabotaging your success, and more importantly, how to break free from its grip. Now remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Chapter 1. Understanding confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek, interpret, and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. In business, this can manifest as overconfidence in strategies, cherry-picking data, or dismissing dissenting opinions. While it feels reassuring, confirmation bias blinds you to critical analysis or to critical insights. For instance, a marketing campaign might seem successful because you measure metrics that support your hypothesis while ignoring signals of failure. To address this, the first step is awareness. Ask yourself, am I truly evaluating all the evidence or just the parts that fit my narrative? Chapter 2. The cost of ignoring dissent. Ignoring dissenting voices stifles innovation and leads to poor decision making. Teams suffer when leaders reject feedback that challenges the status quo. Imagine launching a product without listening to skeptical market research, only to face failure later. Encouraging healthy debate and embracing devil's advocates can safeguard against this pitfall. Constructive disagreement forces you to confront blind spots and refine strategies. By cultivating an open-minded culture, you turn dissent into an invaluable asset rather than a threat. Chapter 3. Data as a double-edged sword. Data-driven decisions are a cornerstone of modern business, but confirmation bias can taint even the most objective metrics. Business leaders often selectively interpret data to reinforce their beliefs, ignoring inconvenient truths. For example, focusing on positive customer reviews while dismissing criticism can give a false sense of security. To avoid this, employ a neutral approach, analyze trends holistically, and seek third-party audits or tools that spotlight overlooked patterns. Balanced data interpretation ensures decisions reflect reality, not wishful thinking. Chapter 4. Building bias-free decision frameworks. Breaking free from confirmation bias requires a structured approach. Establish decision-making frameworks that prioritize evidence over instinct. Utilize tools like decision trees, risk assessments, and weighted scoring models to evaluate choices objectively. Additionally, diversify your team. Different perspectives reduce the likelihood of groupthink. Regularly review past decisions to identify patterns of bias and implement corrective measures. With consistent effort, your business can develop a culture of critical thinking and resilience. Closing thoughts. Confirmation bias thrives in the shadows, quietly undermining your business from within. By recognizing its impact, fostering open dialogue, and relying on objective frameworks, you can transform it from a liability into a learning opportunity. Don't let this silent killer derail your potential. Commit to critical thinking and continuous improvement, and watch your business thrive. Discover how action bias is holding you back. Are you constantly in motion, yet feel like you're spinning your wheels? Action bias, our tendency to act rather than pause to evaluate, may be the silent saboteur. By understanding and addressing this instinct, you can transform wasted energy into meaningful progress. Now remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Chapter 1. What is action bias? Action bias is the reflexive need to do something in the face of uncertainty, even when waiting or thinking might be the better option. Rooted in our evolutionary wiring, this trait once helped our ancestors survive, but in today's complex world, it often leads us to make hasty decisions, prioritizing movement over strategy. Imagine tackling a cluttered desk by shuffling papers without a clear filing system. It feels productive, but the chaos remains. Recognizing when this bias creeps into your behavior, this is the first step toward overcoming its hold and making deliberate, impactful choices. Chapter 2: The psychology behind action bias. Why are we so driven to act? Psychologists link action bias to the discomfort of inaction. When faced with uncertainty, inactivity feels like failure, while action, even if ineffective, offers a sense of control. Sports provide a vivid example. Goalkeepers often dive during penalty kicks, yet statistics show staying centered is often more effective. Similarly, in life and in work, we might rush to send an email or start a project without considering long-term strategy, simply to alleviate discomfort. Understanding this psychological urge helps you pause and assess situations more rationally. Chapter 3: How action bias sabotages success. The consequences of unchecked action bias can be costly. Imagine a manager instituting a new policy after a single bad month without analyzing underlying data. Or consider someone who starts multiple side hustles but abandons each one due to lack of planning. Such behaviors can drain time, energy, and resources, ultimately hindering progress. Action bias often leads to superficial fixes instead of systemic solutions. Learning to resist the urge to act impulsively allows for a deeper focus on meaningful, sustainable changes, turning effort into results. Chapter 4: Strategies to overcome action bias. To overcome action bias, cultivate intentionality. Start by pausing to ask key questions. What is the desired outcome? Will this action bring me closer to it? Adopt the practice of mindfulness to observe your impulses without immediately acting on them. Additionally, prioritize planning and reflection. Dedicate time to strategic thinking, breaking large decisions into manageable steps. Finally, embrace the power of saying no to non-essential tasks. By replacing reactionary habits with thoughtful deliberation, you can channel your energy towards actions that truly matter. Chapter 5: The rewards of intentional action. Breaking free from action bias transforms your life. By acting with purpose, you achieve goals faster and with less stress. Relationships flourish as your responses become more thoughtful rather than rushed. Work becomes more fulfilling as every effort aligns with clear objectives. The satisfaction of progress replaces the frustration of busyness. Remember, the most successful people don't act constantly, they act wisely. Pausing is not laziness, it's the discipline of ensuring each step moves you closer to your dreams. Closing thoughts. Action bias may feel like progress, but true success lies in intentional action. Pause, reflect, then act with purpose. You'll be amazed at the results. How cognitive dissonance is destroying your life. You believe you're smart and rational, yet you keep making choices that hurt you. But have you ever wondered why? It's cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort caused by conflicting beliefs and actions. Because this invisible battle can destroy your confidence, health, and success without you even knowing it. Now remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Chapter 1: Examples of cognitive dissonance. Now we know that smoking is harmful, yet you may light up anyway, convincing yourself it reduces stress. You're aware junk food is bad, but you justify that one burger won't hurt. These are classic examples of cognitive dissonance. Your mind tries to reconcile the contradiction. the contradiction between your knowledge and behavior, and this often results in excuses rather than action. Chapter 2. How cognitive dissonance affects us individually. Cognitive dissonance can trap you in poor decisions. You stay in toxic relationships, telling yourself, it's not that bad. You overspend, justifying it as self-care. Instead of aligning your actions with your values, you distort reality to avoid the discomfort. Over time, these choices chip away at your well-being, and they chip away at your self-esteem. Chapter 3. How cognitive dissonance affects the education system. In education, cognitive dissonance impacts learning. Students who believe they're bad at math avoid studying it, reinforcing failure. Teachers resistant to new teaching methods cling to traditional ways despite evidence. When beliefs clash with new information, denial often wins. And the issue is that this mindset often stunts growth and innovation, leaving both students and educators trapped in outdated thinking. Now here's an important point. Recognizing cognitive dissonance is crucial. Instead of rationalizing harmful actions, confront contradictions head on. Align your behaviors with your beliefs, and you'll unlock clearer thinking, healthier habits, and better decision making. How the Dunning-Kruger effect is ruining your life. Imagine believing you're the smartest person in the room, but you're actually the most clueless. This mental trap, known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, may be quietly sabotaging your progress, confidence, and relationships without you even knowing it. Now remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Chapter 1. The illusion of competence. The Dunning-Kruger effect happens when people with low skills overestimate their abilities. But why is this? It's because they lack the experience to recognize their own shortcomings. You think you're pretty good at something, but in reality, you're not aware of how much you don't know. This false confidence can prevent you from improving because in your mind, you're already good enough. It's like being blind to your blind spots. Chapter 2. Overconfidence in action. Now take Mark, who's been playing chess for a few weeks. He wins a couple of games against beginners and decides he's a prodigy. He challenges an experienced player, and surprise, surprise, he loses horribly. Instead of learning, Mark blames bad luck. Now his overconfidence blinds him to his lack of strategy and skill. And this belief stops him from learning, and it stops him from improving. Chapter 3. The Know-It-All Syndrome. Now meet Sarah, a philosophy student who's read a few famous texts. She's now convinced she's grasped the depths of human thought. In debates, she dismisses others' opinions and assumes she's always right. Her inability to recognize her limited understanding leaves her stuck. Now, instead of expanding her knowledge, she stagnates. Her peers avoid debates with her, and she unknowingly isolates herself. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect makes you your own worst enemy, because overestimating your abilities blinds you to potential growth opportunities. It damages relationships, and it traps you in mediocrity. But what is the solution? Well, we need to embrace humility and continuous learning. Ask for feedback, acknowledge your limits, and recognize that true competence comes from knowing how much there is still to learn. Awareness is the first step towards improvement. Is survivorship bias ruining your life? Ever wondered why your dreams of YouTube fame or becoming a best-selling author seem out of reach? you're probably falling victim to survivorship bias, the sneaky force that makes you overestimate success and underestimate failure. Now remember, this is education mixed with entertainment. So with that being said, let's analyze this train of thought accordingly. Chapter 1. What is survivorship bias? Survivorship bias is when we focus only on successful examples, ignoring the countless failures. Imagine hearing about entrepreneurs who dropped out of college and became billionaires. What you don't see are the thousands who dropped out and failed. By only studying survivors, we get a distorted view of reality, convincing ourselves success is easier than it really is. This bias leads to an unrealistic expectations and faulty decision making in our own lives. Chapter 2. Survivorship bias on YouTube. Ever thought of starting a YouTube channel because everyone seems to be making it big? That's survivorship bias. We celebrate creators with millions of views, but forget about the millions of channels that never break 100 subscribers. This skews our perception of how easy success is, because we ignore the hard work, the luck, and failures that happen behind the scenes, making us feel like we're just one video away from viral fame. Chapter 3. Best-selling author illusions. Do you dream of writing a best-selling novel? If so, survivorship bias has just struck again. We hear about big authors that were successful, but rarely about the thousands of manuscripts rejected each year. For every best-selling author, countless writers struggle to find an audience. Focusing only on those who make it blinds us to the brutal realities of the publishing world. We assume talent alone is enough, forgetting the hidden factors like timing, connections, and sheer perseverance. Now, it's important to realize that survivorship bias convinces us that success is common and failure is rare, and this leads to frustration and self-doubt. But by understanding this bias, we can see the full picture, not just the highlights. Because success stories are inspiring, but real growth comes from learning about failures too. So keep pushing forward with realistic expectations, and remember, those who fail and learn are often the real survivors. Now, because I want you to think, as opposed to telling you what to think, here are some questions to consider. Now, to further understand hindsight bias, you could ask, after an unexpected event happens, do you ever catch yourself thinking that you knew it all along, or that the outcome was inevitable? To give an example, were you unsure if Usyk was going to beat Tyson Fury, but afterwards you knew it all along? Now, this question encourages reflection on how people often feel the outcome was more predictable than it actually was after the fact. Now, to help someone further understand anchoring bias, you could ask, when negotiating a price or making a purchase, how much does the first price you hear or see affect your perception of what is fair or reasonable? So, for example, if you see a course that is projected as being worth £20,000, but now this course is reduced to £97, has this become more appealing? And this question encourages the person to reflect on how an initial piece of information, which is the anchor, can shape their expectations or decisions. And to further understand self-serving bias, you could ask, when you achieve something positive, do you tend to attribute it to your own skills or efforts? But when something goes wrong, do you often attribute it to outside factors or circumstances outside of your control? So, for example, are you someone, or do you know someone that says they're extremely smart, but when they fail at something, like let's say they fail an exam, it's because they only studied the night before, which ironically is not very smart, but I digress. Anyway, this question helps explore how people often take credit for successes while deflecting responsibility for their failures. And to further understand availability bias, you could ask, when you make decisions or form opinions, do you tend to give more weight to the information that is easiest to recall, such as recent events or vivid examples? So this question helps examine how easily accessible memories or information can distort one's judgment, making them overestimate the likelihood of certain events. And to further understand confirmation bias, you could ask, when researching a topic, do you tend to focus more on information that supports your existing opinions and dismiss or overlook evidence that contradicts them? Now, just personal anecdote, the atheist narrative bias of religious people not being very smart is probably one of the most annoying confirmation biases on this earth. Of course, there are smart atheists and smart theists, and your position on this issue does not tell me anything about your intelligence. And I guess that's my confirmation bias. Anyway, the question prior to the example helps explore how people might selectively gather or interpret information in a way that reinforces their pre-existing beliefs. And to further understand action bias, you could ask, when faced with a problem, do you feel the urge to take immediate action, even if you aren't sure it will actually solve the issue, just because you're doing something and that feels better than doing nothing? Now, this question helps you explore how the desire to act can sometimes override the effectiveness of the action itself, simply to reduce the discomfort of inaction. And to further understand cognitive dissonance, you could ask, when you hold two conflicting beliefs or behaviors, such as knowing smoking is bad for your health, but continue to smoke, how do you feel and what do you do to resolve that discomfort? Now, this question aims to explore how individuals handle the tension that arises from holding contradictory ideas or behaviors and how they might change their attitudes or justifications to reduce the discomfort. And just to clarify, within the context of bad, I am saying that smoking is bad for your physical health. Of course, there is a counter argument about the role of nicotine and how smoking can have the domino effect of positive weight management. But within this context, this would be a deflection from the argument. And to further understand the Dunning-Kruger effect, you could ask, when learning something new, do you sometimes feel overconfident in your abilities, even though you may not have enough knowledge or experience to fully understand the complexities of the topic? So, for example, are you trying to educate archaeologists on archaeology after reading one book on archaeology? Are you trying to teach scientists how to do science after reading a few books on science? Consider this. Unless we are truly brilliant, we have all been victims to the Dunning-Kruger effect. And when I see this in action, it actually makes me feel really sad for the person. Anyway, the question with regards to the Dunning-Kruger effect can help us explore the phenomenon where individuals with limited knowledge tend to overestimate their competence and are unaware of the gaps in their understanding. And finally, to fully understand survivorship bias, you could ask, when you look at successful people in a field, do you ever consider that many others who may have tried and failed, or do you focus only on the few who made it to the top? And YouTube is a great example of this, because out of 100 million creators, only 10% get monetization on the YouTube Partner Program. That is a 90% failure rate when we look through the lens of finances. Anyway, the question about this helps us explore how focusing on the successful outcomes can skew perceptions, ignoring the failures that may be equally important for understanding the full picture. So that's the end of today's journey. Now, if you want to support the channel, like, subscribe, and watch the content. And with that being said, I sincerely hope this video has provided value.